The Finance and Facilities Committee meeting of School District of Waukesha. First item on the agenda was the meeting properly posted.
Yes, it was.
Okay, opportunities for citizens to speak. Any citizens wanting to speak tonight? Nope, no such citizens came tonight for speaking, so we'll move right to the action items. Approval of monthly vouchers. Mr. Sikora, was there any questions called in for the vouchers?
Yes, we have two voucher questions this evening on the June accounts payable voucher report. The first is in reference to transportation, and it's from the vendor Go Kids Go. And that check was in reference to transportation services for 15 homeless children for the May 1st to May 15th. The service allows the children's education to not get disrupted due to lack of transportation. And we then bill the residing district for half of the cost of that transportation.
Okay.
And secondly, we had a question regarding the eAchieve advertising. What was the total amount of the eAchieve advertising budget? And how well has that radio ads been working? The total amount we spent on advertising for eAchieve in this 15-16 fiscal year is $392,000. Of that, radio ads were $225,000, direct mail $130,000, web ads $24,000, Facebook content ads $6,000, and print ads of $7,600. How well have the radio ads been working? As you know, that's a little more difficult to measure. Typically, advertising effectiveness is calculated based on cost per lead, and leads are nurtured until they become prospects, and prospects become customers. Well, since the beginning of the year, we've generated 548 leads, and 474 of them been submitted for contact from theachieve.com to receive more information. And of those, 53 told they had heard about eAchieve through the radio. That compared to 70 who received a postcard, and 75 who were referred to from a family member, and 179 who simply found by searching the internet. So it's really hard to say when they say with the radio ads, how did they first hear about us, but that's the information that we have documented.
Appreciate it, Joe.
Interesting information too. So, any other questions about the monthly vouchers? We have a motion for approval.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Caffrey, second by Ms. Madden. Any additional discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None opposed. Motion passes. Approval of participation in the Southeastern Wisconsin School Alliance's contract.
Yeah, this is an organization or a group we've been part of for several years. I think it goes back 15, 20 years probably, if not more. So this is just the annual renewal for the 16-17 school years. Southeastern Wisconsin School Alliance's legislative representation for Southeastern Wisconsin school districts that got together, like I said, a number of years ago. So they work on our behalf, and the fiscal impact or the cost for being part of this is $3,000 per district. It doesn't factor in size of district, which is nice for us and not always the case. So this is just the agreement to move into, I guess now, the current fiscal year. And then inside your packet, you can see all the other districts that are also members, the proposed budget or anticipated budget. And there's about 30 school districts in southeastern Wisconsin, mainly your metro Milwaukee area school districts, but it does also go down to Kenosha, et cetera. So I can answer any other questions related to this. Or Todd, if you have anything to add.
No, we use their lobbying services quite a bit, as well as we get first alert happening in the legislature, so that if we need to make contact with legislators, them on a timely basis.
Mr. Como?
And you felt that they've been effective, right, Todd?
Very much so, yeah. The attorney from DeWitt, Ross Stevens, that we use has been excellent as far as keeping us up to date on things. And I know in a couple different situations, we were able to get to legislators, along with many other people, to kind of change some legislation that would have been harmful to school districts.
Are you aware of any current topics that they're working on?
Vouchers are always an issue. That's going to be an issue as long as there's continued growth in that particular area. Those are the primary ones. I know there's been a new issue with the WRS ruling where if you retire, you have to be out 75 days, even if you're a part-time employee. Now they're looking at either having the legislature reword that so it's more consistent with what the intent of the original law was, or eliminating pieces of it, because it's not been fair to those employees who work a full year and are tied to the 2/3 of the teacher's schedule if they want to come back as retirees. So that issue is another one that I think is being looked at.
Okay. And Darren, I think the South Milwaukee continues to be the fiscal
Yes.
agent?
Yep.
And I think they've been doing that a number of years.
I was doing the billing for it 18 years ago, so I would say since then at least.
Oh, you? Really?
Yeah.
Were you the first person to?
No, it was
be the
there when
fiscal
I
agent?
got there, so
Oh, okay.
it's been around.
Yeah.
But they've
yeah.
been the fiscal agent all those years.
I mean, they seem to have been pretty effective. We get pretty good bang for $3,000 in the type of legal help that we've gotten. So I think this has been good for us.
Yeah, I used to go to their meetings way back when, and they're when you compare them, I'm also on the WASB delegate. When you compare them to WASB's interests are quite a bit different than the,
Correct. Correct.
yeah, if you're a small, it's kind of like trying to understand the difference between living in smaller outstate communities versus living in an urban, suburban
Right,
area.
right.
It's kind of like living on, as far away as Venus is from Pluto, that kind of distance. And so WASB, even though they try to represent all the school districts, it does get dominated by the smaller school
They
districts.
definitely get dominated by rural, whereas SWSA represents the urban Milwaukee area.
Yeah, and give you an example of an old issue that's no longer an issue because of Act 10, but when we were pushing to try and get the disclosure of, healthcare claims as a requirement for all health insurance providers as a matter of state law, all the districts felt that was a good idea, except for all the rural districts who were told by the WEAC organization that their rates would go way up if that was pushed through. So that got stopped because it would harm 300 school districts across the state to be open and disclose what the actual costs were for healthcare. So those were the types of things that we encountered that weren't really good for districts down here. And so we kind of said, well, we have to have our own voice. And it was really just to make sure we had lobbyist, activists, and information from, and we've been able to meet with Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce. It's not like we're just trying to,
Right.
We're trying to
Yeah.
pair our, synergy of resources with some of the other more stronger groups as well at the Capitol. When it comes at education issues that are mutually of interest to, let's say, WMC, Wisconsin Manufacturing
Right,
Commerce, and us. And that's things like STEM and MAID and all these programs that were very active in the school district of Waukesha. So, any other questions on this contract?
Yeah, I move to approve the resolution for the district's participation in Southeastern Wisconsin School Lines for the 2016-27 school year, or 2016-2017 school year. That's a pretty long school year if it went out to 2027. Did I say 27 the first time or not? I meant 17 if I did.
I guess.
We know what you meant.
Yeah. I heard 20, okay. I heard the second anyway. Motion by Mr. Como, seconded by Mr. McCaffrey. Any further discussion?
Right.
No further discussion. Let's go ahead and have an all vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Opposed, none. So motion passes 5-0. Sorry about that. Floppy there. Another one was approval of the White Rock campus agreement.
Yeah, this lease was discussed the last couple of months, so we've come back with, there was 2 questions provided or asked of the administration to bring back in a final version. One was the utility costs, and Glenn Norder and I ran the numbers on the number of square footage being utilized in the site and have adjusted the monthly rent for the lease, just incorporate it all into one line item because it's too hard for us to break out the utilities of 3,800 square feet within a much larger building, obviously. So that number's been incorporated into the rent numbers, which is now $1,450 per month or $17,400 per year. And then the other question was termination language. And we've added language that would provide us the option of providing 120 calendar days. When you're involved with services like this, it's hard to make it too short of a termination time because people are used to coming there, they've set up their relationships. So those were the 2 issues that the committee asked for us to spend a little more time on, and I think we've addressed those. So if there's any other questions.
Just real quickly, what was the original monthly rent?
It was about $200 a month less, so it's about $2,400 built in now for utilities.
Any other questions from other board members on the contract? We had a lot of discussion on this, just a couple points we had to have cleared up. Okay, motion for this to approve? Does anyone have a motion for approval? Ms. Madden,
I would approve that, or I would recommend that the Board of Education approve the lease with Adult Day Services of Southeast Wisconsin LLC at Waukesha White Rock campus for a period of 3 years, first being approved by our committee, of course.
Second.
okay, motion from Ms. Madden and a second from Mr. McCaffrey. Do we have any further discussion on the motion? Okay, all in favor say aye.
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 None opposed. Motion passes 5-0. Should say the ayes have it. Approval of budget transfers and amendments. Last action item for today.
Yes, with this budget, we had first brought to you in December the budget transfers and amendments for approval. And then in March, we had some additional budget transfers and amendments. These are the final budget transfers and amendments for the 15-16 fiscal year. So if you just flip to page 1, what the budget transfers are is they take existing funds, take existing budgeted funds and transfer them across sources or functions to another area while holding the total amount of the changes in revenue or expenditures to district constant. So in other words, with budget transfers, there's no change to the bottom line. With budget amendments, they change the bottom line amount to the budget for a fund. And when changes impact revenue accounts differently than expenditure accounts, there's also an impact on fund balance. So if you were to look at page 3, that gives you a summary of the budget transfers and amendments for the general fund for the total revenue. And as you can see, there's no general fund budget transfers for this time period. There are some amendments, and those the explanations for those amendments are listed on page 1. The bigger totals are, if you were to look at the other state sources, that was an increase in the common school library aid of $46,086. And what happens is in the first part of the year when you do your budget, there's a certain allocation you get from the state trust fund, and you do not know the final numbers until January and February. So they did add an additional $46,000 in funding, so that was recorded as a budget amendment. And then in addition, in federal sources, there was an increase of $175,845 just due to a reallocation of CIS funds from flow-through. And in Title we had some additional grant allocations. So on the following page, on page 4, It lists the budget transfers and amendments for the expenditure accounts by function. And as you can see with the general fund budget transfers, that would net out to zero. In the general fund budget amendments, we have a listing in it for each of the explanation for each of the expenditures. Some of the larger expenditures, if you were to look at, like say for pupil services, there was an additional $112,000 increase in pupil services due to a reallocation of expenditures in CIS funds through flow-through. And then just one line item down for instructional staff services. We reallocated funds for Title I, II, and CAS grants to meet program needs. And then that also reflects the expenditure side, the additional common school funds, which we allocated to the schools. Central services, there was an additional $333,944 increase due to reallocated Title II grants. And then the final item, which was the only change in the actual balance between the revenue expenditures, is we put $1,000 transfer from Fund 10 to Fund 46 to start, well, that's the initial startup for Fund 46, which we discussed earlier in this year. So if you were to look at the very bottom of this page, it shows the change in fund balance for the year. This is for the whole year. It consists of $486,000 in carryover, $38,500 in tech ed carryover, the $1 million operating transfer to Fund 38 for the state trust fund loan payment, then the $1,000 operating transfer to Fund 46. And then finally, the last page, it just shows the other side of the Fund 46 budget transfer, which went to the revenue source. So those are the budget transfers and amendments to close out the fiscal year.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sikora. Any questions from board members? Mr. Como?
So this is to essentially close out our year and to get ready for our audit. When is our audit going to take
Our
place?
preliminary audit starts next Monday through Thursday, and then the final audit is the last week of August.
Let the work begin.
Roughly, what's the total dollars of debt of the district now?
And we have that listed for you in one of our handouts. It lists, right now for the debt service, right now our debt service for the state trust fund loan is at $3.8 million. And then we also have that energy efficiency note. And that started out at the $8 million. That's the only debt service that we have for the district.
Yeah, so I think we just like, what is that number? I mean, composite today versus a year ago, you know?
Yeah, the only difference from a year ago is that $1 million, which we've, for the state trust fund loan, and then the first payments we had on the energy efficiency note, which is over a 7-year period.
We have a very low debt burden for a
Yeah,
district
but
our
it's
size.
always nice to show it, just so we
Oh,
know
yeah.
where it's at and relative to our fund balance. You know, we have a fund balance, and then we have our normal cash flow operating. So, three cookie jars I look at, I guess. So they're not independent of each other. And then also we have our health fund balance too, which is another animal itself. And when we go through the process through the year, without talking too much off subject from budget transfers, but when we go through the process of the year, we run short of cash, we're actually using funds kind of like internal borrowing to a certain extent, whereas we used to external borrow.
Yeah, I used to complete short-term borrows annually. It was a ritual.
So now we do internal borrowing within our own our own funds, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Mr. Como?
I mean, considering all the transactions that take place in the district, you know, $250,000, and I know we had a few amendments and transfers throughout the year on a $144 million, $145 million operating budget. This is a pretty tiny percentage to have to make adjustments and changes to. So, good job over the course of the year when we first project our budget to now. So I'm always amazed at the few changes that we actually have to make. So I'm going to move to approve the budget transfers and amendments as presented.
I second. Mr. Como motions, I second. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed. Motion passes 5-0. Now the information items, monthly budget report. Mr. Sikora?
For the monthly budget report, if you'd like to flip to page 4, that's the first, that lists the revenue for Fund 10. And as you can see, when we first start out, the first column on your left is the sources and objects. Sources are for revenues and the objects are for the expenditures. So if you were to look at then it lists the June 2014-15 activity and then the June 2015-16 activity. And as you can see, for property taxes, source 211, we have $15,417,000 in property taxes booked in June. And the majority of that is a receivable, which we're booking for the next 2 months because we have our property taxes spread out through August, but we're booking all our property taxes in this fiscal year. So the portion of that is the receivable, which we're going to be receiving in July and August. And then if you're going a little bit farther down the page, you'll see in source 345, which is our tuition open enrollment. That's our open enrollment payment that we get on an annual basis at the end of the year, and that was $4.8 million. So those are two of the larger revenue sources in the month of June. Then flipping the page, if you were to go to page 5, that indicates the revenue that we received from state sources in June. So if you were to look at, again, the June 2015-16 column, you see in source 619 that we did receive our other categorical aid, which is at $150 aid per student. And as we'll discuss later in the meeting, that aid for next year is going up another $100, which is help us with our revenue limit shortfall. So then next item down is our final equalization aid payment for the year. And then you'll see that we did the other revenue we received from state sources. And going a little farther down, in the federal sources, there are some of the grants that are not yet booked yet, but we're just presenting this statement to you, very early in the process. So overall, in revenues, we received $42.2 million during the month. In year-to-date, we're at $142.3 million. And when comparing to last year, the major difference is we just did not book any capital leases because we financed those directly. So if you were to flip to page 6, that indicates our salaries and our our benefits so far through the year, both through June and year-to-date. And as you can see, for salaries, we're very close to where we were last year, within 1%. And then in benefits, we still have to book our adjustment for our health claims payable. We still need to get our final June numbers in. But again, we wanted to present this statement to you to see where we stand as of now. So overall, the big change in here that is not yet booked is when Fund 27 is finalized, if you go all the way to page 9, and you look at Object 827, you'll see that we budgeted $17.4 million for a transfer to Fund 27. So when all the payables are entered and all the entries are done, then we do balance Fund 27, which is our special education fund. And we will be transferring, approximately $17.4 million to Fund 27. So that's the biggest entry that obviously is not in here yet, in addition to the health claims payable adjustment and the payables which we're booking as of now and which we'll continue to book through the remainder of this month. So our projections overall, we are going to achieve our budgeted projections and have some additional dollars, which we'll discuss later in this meeting, and how we plan on allocating them.
Okay, any questions? Moving on to the next item. Energy projects update.
Yeah, as you know, we, in 2015, entered into an energy efficiency program through the state, and I'm pleased to say that those projects are all now completed, so we could have a final report. So I'll turn it over to Glenn to walk us through and get us started, and then we can answer any questions you might have related to it.
In order?
For the opportunity, I'm glad that we're finally able to come in front of you and give you the final report on what we did as far as our performance contracting. We put together a little slideshow. You received it in your packet to kind of give you kind of an overview of what we did through the performance contract. So if you look up there, you can see kind of what performance contracting is. It's a comprehensive master plan. We developed a long-term strategy to provide funded approach to improve education, facilities, and infrastructure. It's a path toward addressing 21st century education. It's a focus on no or minimal impact to the local taxpayer. It's turnkey implementation and management. It's a single contract for the entire project. We stepped into a guaranteed performance for 7 years with Siemens. When we put this together, we identified $24.5 million worth of energy savings projects. The board decided that we would do $8 million worth of those projects, $1,000 a year, or $1.5 million over 7 years. And like Darren said, back in 2014, we stepped into this initial phase with Siemens. They came in, they audited our facilities along with the help of my staff. We looked at replacing outdated equipment earmarked in our capital plan to begin with. We investigated systems, heating systems, cooling systems, lighting systems, building control systems, ventilation, electrical systems, water conservation, building envelope. And then we made some recommendations for improvement, which were boiler plant renovations and replacements, energy efficient motors and VFDs, lighting and occupancy sensors, water efficiency. It helped us with deferred maintenance, and then electrical infrastructure. And our objectives were to help offset some of the deferred maintenance that we had, long-term savings, which I think we will do. Actually, we're guaranteed we will. Guaranteed of energy, water, and operations and maintenance savings. Levels of occupant comfort and building functionality, and capture benefits that may occur as a direct result of such energy-related projects. Realize savings by implementing a stringent measurement and verification practice. And we'll talk about that a little bit later in the presentation. So I thought I'd let Megan answer what energy savings or performance contracting is for some of us.
The state, formerly known as the Energy Office of Energy Communication now. I've created a program. I got a grant from the U.S. Department of Education a couple of years ago, in 2014, to help install the municipal energy efficiency and technical assistance program. What we do is try to help folks with projects just like these, to give them say, well, allows schools to revenue limits with an sure that board is So in your packet, you have a YME tab, and sort of like just went over. We're an independent third party, we're at no cost, because we're paid out of our federal grant. We have an engineer on staff, Fortunately, we can leave this slide on, but unfortunately, the financial summary is over part of the district projects that we identified to do. But if you look in your packet, the ones that we decided to do as we went through the $24.4 million or whatever that figure was, is we decided we'd do domestic water fixture savings, building envelope sealing, clean and service HVAC equipment, VFDs and soft starts, high-efficiency domestic water heaters, chiller and condensing unit replacement, pneumatic controls to DDC, direct digital control, this is what update our building management systems to Insight integration, South High School boiler replacement, Les Paul Middle School boiler replacement, South High School natatorium lighting, LED exterior and stadium lighting, convert water to waste condensing units, miscellaneous O&M repairs, and then north-south west high school football stadium lighting. If you look at in the financial summary, we were okayed for $8 million. We committed $8 million. After doing some competitive bidding, Siemens was able to do a cost reduction of $397,701, which allowed us to do some additional projects, and then we received $95,563 in rebates. A couple of the additional projects we were able to do, we were able to do a upgrade of the building management system at Randall. The extra money also allowed us to move forward with the field lighting, because we weren't sure if we were going to be able to afford to do that, but after the competitive bidding, we noticed that we were going to be able to move forward. So then were some of the additional projects. There is still money, I think, the rebate money that we are still looking at projects to do in the future. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see, unfortunately, again, it's kind of transposed, but we estimated our lighting rebate would be $8,300
$8,390. We submitted $8170, we actually got $72. The domestic water estimated at 14, we submitted 14, and we received 14,000. Our VFDs, we estimated 7,000, we submitted 9,000, and we got 9,900. Pass-through cooling, 1,000, we submitted 1,000, we received 1,000. Our chiller and condensing units, we estimated 6,000, we submitted 9,733, and we actually received 10,647. And then for our boiler replacements, we estimated 48,000, we submitted 48,000, $800 with the total of $95,563, again, which allowed us to do additional work in the district that we would not. All of these were things that helped us take some of the things on our capital plan that we would have not been able to do. On to the next slide. One of the projects we did was the renovation or the replacement of the South High School natatorium lighting. And I don't know if you had a chance to look up the referenced article in the LED Journal, but it was a very nice article done on our natatorium regarding the lighting levels, how it was increased in there, testimonials from coaches around the area about the lighting in that natatorium, on how good it is, and then again, reducing the cost of lighting that natatorium immensely. We don't have the final figures for you yet, but we will in the future of what that cost payback will be, but it's a really excellent project to do, and the feedback from the swimmers to the spectators to the coaches has been phenomenal. And we updated our building management systems. It really, the benefit there is for my HVAC techs, they now have every school but 3 under the same building management system, which makes it very user-friendly for them. They're not going to 3 different programs to try to set schedules for our schools, our running of our HVAC equipment. So they're really pleased with what we did, and it really makes it much easier for them to schedule, and in the long run is a cost savings measure for the district when we are able to schedule down the run times.
How old was the previous software that we were using?
Some of it, Joe, is as old as 20 years. So we have, unfortunately, we have three left that we are looking at. I'm working with Darren to see if we can slowly knock those 3 off too. And then
And how many people will know how to run that now?
well, we have 5 HVAC techs that are running it now, and we will have some of our building lead custodians that will be able to run their buildings off their building management system.
Wasn't that one of the downsides of the older software too? We're kind of losing people who had knowledge of how to
We had lost
operate
all the
those
people
systems?
that had knowledge of running those systems. Fortunately, we hired 2 real good techs who picked up on the old systems pretty rapidly with the help of one of my old HVAC techs, but still pretty antiquated for
So
them
you
to
were-
be using. So
You used to sweat bullets when you had issues with the
more
other
than
software?
bullets. Then we decided we'd share some pictures, some before and after pictures. You remember seeing this picture of the salt boilers. The bottom of the boiler had actually been eaten out by rust and scale to the point where we actually had to shut that boiler down before we did the new boiler project. You look at the after picture, them are the 5 new condensing boilers that are in South High School and are running very very well right now. We actually are using one of those boilers. If we go to the next slide, it'll show the new pool heat exchanger that we put in. So we always had to run a boiler to dehumidify the space, the pool space. So now we are running that same boiler, not only dehumidifying the space, but we're heating the water. So the picture on your left, the old Ray Pack, we took offline. It's still operational in case we ever have an issue. We have some redundancy, but the efficiency of the heat exchanger steps above what that unit is. Like I said, we were running a boiler 12 months out of the year to dehumidify that space anyway. Now we're doing 2 functions with that boiler.
Weren't there some concerns on the corrosion, potential corrosion of that?
But yeah,
And did
if
we
you look
address
at it,
that?
the whole unit is built out of copper nickel, which is a non-corrosive material. We are very proactive of watching flow. That's another thing that can cause corrosion is the lack of flow through the heat exchanger. So the guys are always monitoring the flow coming through there. But the product that heat exchanger is made out of is top of the line.
How long has that been in place?
That has been in place since April.
So it's still pretty new
Pretty new.
for us, and
Yeah,
something you'll keep your eyes on,
yeah.
as you said, so, okay.
Then just another slide, this is these are actually the pumps for the boilers at South High School. You look on your left, that's the old ones. You look on your right, much better application of what we're doing, much more energy efficient. They're all on frequency drives, so they're running at the efficiency, not always at full bore. Then we put together some results and some savings we thought we'd share with you. Our natural gas savings is, these are guaranteed savings through performance contract. These numbers are here. So if we don't meet these savings, Siemens gives us a check for the savings that we don't. So our therms are 98,683 therms per year, which adds up to 561,995 pounds of coal that we're not burning because we're using that amount of natural gas we're using. Our electrical energy savings is 706 kilowatt hours, which is the equivalent of 52 homes used for 1 year. And our water conservation is 7,324,301 gallons, and them are guaranteed numbers. Again, I want to emphasize that, and that would be the equivalent of 11 Olympic-sized swimming pools. This does not include the water savings we're saving in the synthetic turf fields. So you can add about 2 million gallons a year on that on average. So the water department put together a average consumption for us per year of water that we use. Through the years of 2009 to 2014, we used an average of 28.4 million gallons of water a year. So as you can see, we're going to be guaranteed 7.3 million gallons saved through the performance contract, along with the 2 million average for our fields. That's over 9 million gallons. That's almost a third of our annual consumption that we have now reduced. The good news is, because of the pact that passed, we are now going to get water from Lake Michigan, but you'll notice if you're a local resident that your water bills are going to about triple. So if you look at what we've done here, by saving almost a third of what the water consumption that we use help us out with that increased cost that we're going to incur from the water. Questions on that slide? I thought that was a very good slide because it really put it down into, what we're saving in layman's terms as far as pounds of coal, homes of electricity, Olympic.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. McCaffrey.
Just a quick question on the water consumption. It really doesn't have anything to do with this, but I noticed that the soccer fields we were watering this week, are we running those on a separate meter
Yes.
as not to hit
Yeah, we
with,
don't have a sewage meter on that.
What I wanted to ask questions about the water issue, and I wanted it to be highlighted because it's such an important issue for the community, the use of water. And, we do have the Great Lakes thing that was approved, which is gonna cost everybody who consumes water by how much they consume to pay for. So by a district cutting our consumption by a third, first of all, it helps preserve water for other businesses around town. It's being a good, we're doing our fair share to reduce our use, but it also reduces our future cost. So it's a pretty amazing thing when we take a project like this, and we were very proud of the water savings we'd have from the fields, but this is 3 times as big. So this is a much bigger savings. So in terms of a successful project, in that regard, that's one of the real winners for a community like Waukesha. And it's mainly because we're kind of unique in that need. Any other questions on this part of it? All I can say is that when you talk about water and how you use water and how you consume water, it's probably one of the most difficult issues that you face as a community. I think I saw on CNN that Beijing has sunk 4 inches last year because they pump all their water from underground, and it's sinking the entire city because they have no choice. So the fact that Waukesha now has the ability to transfer water from Lake Michigan and back, plus us, communities like us trying to reduce what we consume, is just good long-term planning. And that's what is important about this district and this committee as well as the community as a whole.
Okay, next slide.
So this is part of what the METAP program is doing for Waukesha schools, is we've put all of your energy data into Energy Star Portfolio Manager. And K through 12 schools, just to give you an idea, this is a big database that the federal government has been trying to, EPA and DOE have been working together. When Bloomberg was the governor, or was the mayor of New York, he made every commercial building put their data into Portfolio Manager, and there's been a lot of initiatives like that. So about 30% of all buildings in there are K through 12 schools, but in Wisconsin, 56%. They make up 56% of the total Energy Star certified buildings. So K through 12 schools in Wisconsin already know this makes sense and are doing it. And I would just say that Waukesha fits right in here, which is exactly why we wanted to get your schools in there, and we can advance along. There's an Energy Star task force between NASIO and EPA. Well, okay, so this is your labeled K through 12 schools in Wisconsin slide, which I actually cut out of the package, so keep going. And then here's so there's an initiative where other state energy officials are working on this. I am too. Let's keep going. A total of 60 districts have certified at least one facility since 2000, with a total of 335 unique school buildings, receiving a total of 564 certifications. And we can advance. Basically, so this is an example of what it looks like, and that is Banting Elementary energy use by calendar month. But one more forward, 17 Waukesha schools would be eligible for the Energy Star label. And we've basically taken out, you can go next slide too, taken out all the preliminary data. So the first slide was middle, then we've got elementary. And you can see they're all above the Energy Star level there. And so the Energy Star score is 2014, then we have what your score is in 2015 after most of the Siemens project is done. I would say this is still kind of preliminary because you know, we've just really finished up here in 16, so we'll continue to track the project. And then the next step is to bring in a PE, you know, a regular engineer to certify. And basically that just means Glenn's got all the stuff we need for that, just building plans. We need to make sure we have the gross square footage right. We haven't made any miscalculations about how we use the building. And then we can get them certified, get plaques, because I think it's really important for the students to see that kind of thing. They won't see all the cleaning and tuning that Glenn asked these guys to do, but that's one of the things that sets this project aside from others that I've seen. It wasn't just let's buy new shiny boilers, it was let's clean it, let's tune it, let's commission it, let's make sure that we're making an investment in our infrastructure that's gonna last for another, 50 to 100 years. Those boilers were in there for a long time. We expect these ones to last as well. So, and that brings us to the measurement and verification. I see we have sort of a draft presentation.
Real quick,
Oh, yeah.
the Energy Star certification level, does the federal government determine that? And how, can you tell us what kind of goes into that?
Sure.
I mean,
So-
it's just a number to me, and it's a bar, and oh, yeah,
Right.
we passed it, you.
Yeah, so it's
But what's it
an
mean?
energy use intensity level, and it's based on this big database where we're trying to get as many schools in there as possible. And so it takes into account the weather and longitude, latitude, all that kind of good stuff, but also other buildings and the way the building's used. So they ask you a lot of questions about how many computers. We've hassled Glenn and his staff about, hours of operation. Is there a pool in this building? You get down to the heating plant. You can even describe the projects that you do in the database so that it takes all that into account when calculating your energy use intensity score. It's free software. You can just Google EPA, Energy Star, or Portfolio Manager, and it'll give you kind of the basics of how they come up with these numbers and what's a good score. So they look at what's an efficient building. Kentucky is building net zero schools right now, which sort of chafes because they're a real coal state and we should be beating them. But anyway, we will. We're getting there. But you look at some of these super high-performance schools that have, no energy burden, and then you look at a 100-year-old school that has done air sealing and tightened up. And I mean, they're never going to have the same score as a school that produces as much energy as it uses. But this is a pretty good barometer, and we've got a lot of schools across the nation in the database, so that's why we keep building it. And we've put, like I said, there's 335 school buildings in Wisconsin in Portfolio Manager. We have 427 school districts, so we have some work to do yet, but we're working on it.
So, real quick question, I mean, I don't see our high schools qualifying as Energy Star schools. Is that because of the fact we have pools? Is that a big negative on that, I assume?
Well, I don't know that they allow us to certify them with the pools. And that was one thing that I was gonna go back and check with my intern. The middle and the elementaries just have way better Energy Star scores because they don't have that big sink of having a pool in there. But I'm not sure if they would qualify on a different level.
We should check into that, just because I think we do a lot of work. If you look at all the different things we've done in this last program and prior programs, it's kind of unfortunate those 3 schools won't be rated.
Well, and you can't rate what the work you guys have done in the fields too, which I think is really groundbreaking, the artificial turf and then the stadium lighting, which you're not seeing other places. And it's stories that people are really interested in hearing. So, well, I'll definitely look into that, and they're always changing this database too, based on feedback from states like Wisconsin, because we've kind of been a leader in adding schools. So we can give them that feedback and say, look, why don't you have a separate certification for schools that have a pool? Kids gotta swim. It's good for them to know.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand why people don't like pools. I mean, we just have a board member that was very clear about that. But that we do have pools, and it's historical within the district, the fact that we go about trying to make sure they're properly handled and managed and hopefully properly used should be recognized in some sort of factor, so.
Then we move on to the measurement and verification, and this is something, before I let Glenn go, this is something my program is just really, really interested in, and I thought that working with Siemens on this has gone really well. We got here after the contract was signed. There was already a minimal plan in place, but they were very willing to make sure to work with us, to show us that they had set up visits, that their visits would not just be one time a year, but they would be during multiple seasons, so that they can actually run tests on boilers and chillers. You can't do the chillers in December, you know, so, and the training, Glenn's guys have been really good about sort of demanding that and being there, and I think that's what makes a successful project, is the follow-up, the commissioning, the training, and the M&V, because they're on the hook. If my program's tracking the utility savings and we're not getting it, and we can show that we're not getting the kilowatt hours, then Siemens is on the hook, and we'll follow up. So that's why it's so important that Glenn and his guys really made sure that contract was set up right with the right operational hours and the right information, and I really feel like they did.
Just to add to that a little bit, we did meet as a team with Siemens, turned the project over to the performance assurance team. Again, we've met regarding the facilities, and we'll continue to review how we're doing. Like Megan said, and I really liked, is the fact that we're not going to do this just once a year. This will be done multiple times during the year, just to make sure that we're staying on task where we want to be. And that's not only important to us, but it's also important to Siemens, because they need to know where they're going to. Or at the end, they end up, like we've said, writing a check to the school district of Waukesha. So we just kicked this off not too long ago, but we'll be moving forward with that. As we go on, so. And then we just thought we'd add a thank you to all the people that were involved. Of course, these are the folks that worked on the project with us throughout the last year and a half, and we've had great success with all of them, so we're pleased to be able to put their name up there along with ours. We're very fortunate to have very good contractors working along with us. One more. If you can look on your right and then on your left, this is the difference between the football lighting on the high school football fields. Of course, the one on the left is our old lighting. The one on the right is our new lighting. As you can see, the lighting is much better. You can also see that the lighting is directed mainly on the field, which is what we wanted. We have reduced the light spillage to our neighbors immensely. In fact, some of you know Roy from our food service. He actually lives right over by North. And the first time we turned him on, he came to my office the next morning and said, "Thank you. You no longer light up my house like it's daylight." We have done 2 walkthroughs with surrounding community schools from around the state of Wisconsin already. Megan mentioned the fact that these are the talk of the town, and they truly are. When the folks see the light levels and the light that's actually, again, directed at the field, not everywhere else. We have a perfect example. The first place we take them to is Waukesha South. The soccer field is still the old technology, so we turn them on first. We allow them to warm up for about 15 minutes till they get to their brightness. Then we flip on the stadium lights, the new stadium lights, which are instant. We allow them to look at that for about 5 minutes, and then we turn the soccer lights off. All of the light that's spilled out from the soccer lights to light up the high school, Pick and Save, and the surrounding areas is gone. And everyone kind of goes, "Wow, that's really neat." So people love them. I think, like I said, we have, I think I've taken 16 to 20 schools now. I've done site visits with, and coaches love them, the spectators love them, the kids love them. I thought the spectator one was kind of interesting to me, because you don't quite get the light level in the stands anymore. But again, if you ever go to a professional basketball game and you're sitting in the stands, the light's on the court. The action is, and that's what they like about it. So they're pretty neat.
Did we have any spectator events? Was it?
We've had some soccer games already
Okay.
on them. Yes.
So football will be the.
Football will be the next big key. Actually, we're having a big band competition at the end of July
Oh, yeah.
over at Waukesha North, which will be an interesting one too.
That'll be a good one. So the end of July. So it accomplished our goals and maybe a little more than of what we were hoping to achieve in terms of light pollution cutting.
Yes,
And it's demonstrable with the south system most of all, huh?
in light pollution aspect, yes.
There's some other entities around town that probably should be looking at this too, because there's obviously always complaints from neighbors about light.
That wraps up our presentation. Any questions?
Ms. Ryanchek?
Thank you. I don't have my notes in front of me, but the original cost for the boiler, I believe it was at South, and the years it was going to take to pay off, do you remember what that was? 70, 90, 100 years?
A
was
lot, yeah,
crazy.
yeah.
So when I read the what is energy savings performance contracting, and it says a partnership of the owner and the energy service company, where the ESCO identifies improvements, designs, and constructs a project and guarantees the improvements will generate energy cost savings to pay for the project over the term of the contract. So if the contract is 7 years, is that correct? How does the energy cost savings pay for the project?
Question, and it's something about performance contracting it's a little murky for folks who don't do it all every day or look at it. We bundle the measures, so you've got some projects like the air sealing or LED exterior lighting, not necessarily the stadium lights, but other lights that have a really fast payback, and boilers that typically have a 20 to a 30-year payback. Many of these things don't take into account, of course, that how long were the old boilers there, Glenn? 40 years?
Probably 35 years.
I just saw some Kiwani boilers a little north of here that had been there for 80 years, and they were still operational. But you can only really you use a modeling software to come up with kind of the life based on the efficiency, and then you use real utility data. So that's a bundled number. So the whole project itself will pay back in 7 years. That's why you wouldn't want to just go and do a boiler all by itself, because that would cost a lot of money and wouldn't quote unquote pay back, but I would say you're still going to have your schools in 30 years. So you would really want to invest in them, make sure that they're comfortable too.
And then I thought the stadium lights were, it was going to take a long time to catch up with that one too.
Right, that was outside of the performance contract, the stadium lights?
Well, it was in the original.
Yeah, it's in the performance
yeah.
contract. I think the problem with the whole concept is that the idea of how many years to pay back something is really not. I mean, it's a requirement of the legislation to state, but you're not going to run without boilers. You're not. Let's say if you had to do a return on investment on replacing a roof, well, try not to have a roof on your building. Okay. Stadium lights, I would say, is probably a little bit more of a reach, because we probably could have gotten by with the old ones for certain. I mean, we wouldn't have had to replace them. The decision there was there a community value to replacing them? And we believe there was. And but yes, it was probably the toughest one to justify of all the projects, because of the fact that you didn't necessarily have to replace the lights you already had. But a boiler, for sure, you have to the systems that we're using to monitor this stuff had to be replaced, and yet the payback is always going to be. So this idea that you should have quick paybacks is not practical. It's like some politician is saying, geez, this is great if you can pay it back in 7 years or 8 years. There's no revenue stream to pay it back with. If I put in a new piece of equipment that generates revenue and it can pay itself off in 6 months to 10 months, then that's it. But we don't generate revenue when we put in a boiler. We run a school. It doesn't generate revenue.
Right, and I think the community impact of the lighting project is huge. Plus, I would just say, when you replace on failure, then you often have fewer choices and higher costs. So taking a measured approach to this and planning ahead of time and looking at a whole host, 26 schools, really looking at how many things we can get done A 7-year contract, the law allows you 20, and most state performance contracts would take the full 20-year quote-unquote payback, because those buildings have been there 150 years, and we expect them to be 150 more. And we want to keep that infrastructure there, which I think is sort of the bent of your schools as well.
But, fair question. Mr.
Just a
McCaffrey?
comment, I think that moving forward with our new compact, our water compact, the savings is going to be on water. Natural gas and electricity are going to be absolutely second to what water is going to cost this school district. So you figure that if the bill is going to go up a third, I mean, 9 million gallons a year is going to be over the course of this contract.
Go ahead, Karen, you had,
Sorry, so replacing that boiler is what saved the 11 Olympic-sized swimming pool?
No,
Okay,
not just
all
the
right, I
boiler.
thought that's what you were saying.
No, what we used to do with some of our cooling units is we just kept continuously running water through them and dumping it down the sewer. Okay. So that has been eliminated for the most part, right, Glenn? It's gone.
All of them have been eliminated.
All of them are gone. So when you think about energy, very few people think about water, except that's going to be what's going to cost. I will pay more on water when this compact is done than I pay for energy. So I think that what people fail to realize when they talk about this energy project is people just think about energy, they think electricity and natural gas. That will be what we pay for natural gas and electricity will be second to what we will be paying for water in 7 years from now. Scary. So the 9 million that we're saving just on this, and I'm sure in the future we'll be looking at other ways to save water. As I watch the water go at the soccer field itself, because you can see it from the road. And what Oak Creek's going to charge us for water that we don't send back. Probably be, I bet you it goes up 6 times for that water, because we can't send it back. So don't think of energy as electricity and natural gas, because that's not where you're going to get your money savings out of this. It's the 9 million gallons of water that we're saving every year where our energy savings is going to come from.
Ms. Madden?
This is a project that we started, and we certainly did not have unanimous consensus with our F&F committee, and I don't think the board either, but we had very good debates about it, and we got a lot of questions answered that without those debates, we probably would have let go with the wind and let the Siemens and Glenn Norder's department handle. But it turned out to the benefit of all the taxpayers. So those kind of discussions in the future, people have to remember, are good. And this project was a good project, and I hope we continue with it, because there's some other things that we can do too that were in that original project.
Yeah, in that regard, I mean, as long as this is used properly and we try to optimize it, maybe, we didn't do everything. Obviously, there's probably ways we could probably do it better the next time, and hopefully at a smaller scale. This is kind of the big jump out of the box, but if we do another one, we'd think it'd be a smaller scale, but maybe with less overhead cost associated with implementing the projects, especially if it's not as broad mechanical scope as this one was. For example, we're starting right here on Lindholm, where we're replacing the windows on one side of the building. We're putting in central air, eliminating window air conditioners. This is a historic building, and we've always talked about getting out of here and tearing it down. Well, we're not talking about that anymore. We're talking about now fixing it up, redoing it, getting central air, getting out the window air conditioners. We still got other windows to replace. We may elect to do that on something like this. And then the other facility is Saratoga. Of all our schools, which includes STEM, the Saratoga campus, which includes our Central Services Building and Harvey Phillips, and the fact we actually are looking to expand that program, this would be a good thing to look at, okay, can we use this to turn that into an acceptable use facility in terms of more energy efficient, more just overall efficiency, and expend the seats and STEM at the same time. So those are just two projects that I'd see that we just need to take up right away as putting on the table for another program, but we need to do it in a way where we can't afford the same overhead cost structure that we were able to kind of eat on this one, but we don't want to eat going forward. So I've asked Mr. Norder to look at that along with Mr. Clark and see if we can, and then any board member that has other ideas that they would like to have considered as well should bring them forth between now. We probably only have about 60 to 90 days to put this together if we're going to do it this year. So, any other comments from board members? From administration, any comments? Mr. Gray, did you think the project went over today?
Looks good to me. Some of the ones that I viewed, I think I think when they originally talked about the lights on the fields, they had some wrong information as far as payback, and I asked Glenn to relook at that, and that payback is much, much shorter because they neglected to figure that the fields are used 3 times as much as they have been in the past, plus the cost, the LED lights will cost many, many years. They'll be working along since after we're gone, and changing the old light bulbs were about $1,000 a shot. That's if you could get a guy to climb up there. But so that particular project, I know when they looked at it, they used current information, but we know, if you drive by north, that field's used a lot into the evening, almost 10 months out of the year. So when we looked at those factors, we knew that those lighting costs were going to be a much quicker payback. A few of the other projects were understandable with the high schools on the energy issue. Not only do they have pools, but they also have 25,000 square foot field houses that are just big, open, empty boxes that take a lot to heat or cool. And so those, I'm sure, have an impact on the energy rating as well.
Okay. Sounds like we have keep us posted on how we look with the rest of the overall programs as well.
But we'll come back with the.
Where would you rate us compared to the other? Are we at a high level, or are we just kind of one of those ones that you kind of look at?
Oh, no. I would say this is really the best energy saving performance contract I've been involved with since we started this program. It really is. It's the most comprehensive, and it has the stuff I like. My proclivities are energy management, trying to use what you have, trying to clean it, trying to tune it, air sealing, because I came from the weatherization sort of building envelope world. So I like to see that, because too often I think people get distracted by windows or new mechanicals only. I get the windows, it's fine. You just don't get a lot of savings off windows. Those Windows guys are kind of lying in the ads.
She hasn't seen these.
So, and if they're broken, you can get a lot of savings. But again, it's investing in infrastructure, and I liked your comment about the debate, because I think that although it can give people heartburn, it's a very healthy thing to do, and it's great to see people who care so much about their school district and the kids, because we want to keep the focus on the education, but they still have to come into a building, and it should be run properly. And that's Glenn's job. I think he does a really good job. So no, I think this is a great project. And I'm getting excited to write up, kind of a couple of case studies. We've got the natatorium study that was already in the LED Journal, which is just, people are really excited about that. And then I thought we were going to have to get security for Glenn at the Wasbo meeting, because all those facility guys wanted to ask about the fields. They were just crowded around him. Because there are not a lot of great solutions, and there's a lot of light pollution issues. And those metal halide, those old high-pressure sodium metal halide bulbs aren't really good for your vision, and they light up the neighbors. So we'll get this thing, we'll figure it out.
Mr. Como?
Just thanks to Glenn and all your hard work, your team's hard work. Megan, we'll see you back here. You're going to have to do a little update on your logo, right?
We don't have a new one yet, but we'll get one.
And Siemens, all the hard work that you guys, and all the questions, and all the subcontractors too that put all the hard work in. It takes everybody working together to improve the community, and so hats off to everyone. And we'll do the measuring, the testing and measuring, make sure that we continue to achieve what we initially set out to achieve, and we always have the guarantee to fall back on. So thanks for all your hard work.
Okay, that was the big story of the night. We've been waiting for about 3 months to fit this into the schedule. And appreciate that Siemens is here tonight as well and willing to contribute. We'll move on now to the 2016-2017 budget update.
Yeah, I just wanted to update you on a few, well, actually, there's several principles we've been talking about in terms of enrollment and everything. Next month, we'll have a preliminary budget for you to actually take a hard look at before we head into fall for final approval. But Joe and I have been obviously spending a lot of time on the 16-17 budget and wanted to review some, like I said, some of these items are things that we've discussed previously, but there are really some critical factors that we need to keep in mind, not only for 16-17, but the years following. So the colored chart on the second page, the sheet, kind of walks you through, and what we tried to do here is give you an idea of where the revenue limit's heading. And the revenue limit, as Joe referenced in the executive summary, is about 92% of our operational revenue. So it's truly the driver. And that's pretty much $9,800, just over $9,800 times the number of resident pupils we have in the school district. And that's what you get to levy and get state aid. Those two pieces add up to that number. So in this year for 16-17, based on our revenue, our enrollment projections, we're projecting a drop of 91 students at our September count. And actually that drives our revenue limit to decrease next year by $1.2 million. That's obviously not the right trend. This year, that'll be offset because the per pupil categorical aid is going up by $1.2 million. We're heading into the second year of the biennial budget, so there's a lot of certainty, we think, in funding. So we can say that this year, we're going to, fend off that loss of revenue limit authority of $1.2 million. But in the middle of that upper section of the page, those exemptions, we spent a lot of time, and people tend not to want to talk about them, is we get about $2.5 million a year from the declining enrollment exemption and the hold harmless exemption, which is also an enrollment, essentially an enrollment-driven exemption, which is a one-time non-recurring exemption. For you to be eligible for both of those, you have to have sustained loss of resident enrollment, and that's what we have. Our current projections have us probably around 12,000 students district-wide by early in the 2020s. So that's something we really need to keep an eye on as we move forward. The second part that we talked about on the executive summary is that the voucher program. We're entering our second year of the voucher program. That's all new. The voucher program's still capped at 1% of your resident enrollment, or roughly 130 kids for us. And we are budgeting at 104. So we're not budgeting the worst case scenario for the vouchers. The voucher program's an interesting budgetary issue because we actually get more revenue authority from the voucher program than the expenditure is, but we don't get as much money as if those kids would have actually come to our schools. And that's really the key. And I can't tell you, we don't know who those kids are. I couldn't tell you a single name on that list. That's closely held by DPI. But out of 104 estimated kids, I would like to think a lot of those kids, probably being residents of the Waukesha school districts, likely would have come to our schools. But I can't tell you what the true fiscal impact of that program is in terms of what might have been versus what is. But that voucher cap will go up 1% after this or I guess we are in 16-17 now. We'll go up 1% every year until 9 years from now, and then the cap's it comes off completely. So And Lord knows what legislative changes will occur between now and when that cap might come off. So again, that's a program we really need to keep an eye on. We're building history to come up with better budget assumptions for the committee to consider, but I think where we're at is a good place. It's not worst case. Program I'm assuming is going to grow like open enrollment did back in the day. So we're raising up to 104 students. The hardest part in projecting the tax levy and eventually the rate is knowing where state aid is going to come in. It's a very complicated formula. You don't certify your expenditures from the previous year until into September once the audit's done. So what I've done is in those 3 columns in the middle of the page, DPI is required to come out with an aid estimate on July 1st, and they've done that. And what they reported out for us is $50,162,000 in aid. That's a drop of about $400,000 from the previous year. What DPI does not know is what our actual expenditures are going to be. They do this off of our budgeted expenditures, and actually most of the updates that or adjustments you've already approved, not tonight's, but the other ones are already reflected in that projection. But ultimately, we won't know our final expenditures for another 4 to 6 weeks. So what I do is I throw the state aid estimate that DPI provides in the middle, and then I say if it goes up 2% or down 2%, somewhere in the range. So I'm not tying us to a number. I'm not saying it's going to be this. Actually, I can tell you it's not going to be any of these 3 numbers. It's going to be somewhere, in that range. But I wanted to give you a feel of where we are, and it's looking in terms of rate and levy like we'll have a relatively flat, maybe a slight decrease. But I want you to think about how we got there. We lost $1.2 million in revenue limit authority, which shrinks the pool, which usually, depending on what aid does, will reduce your levy. So it's not fiscal management secrets that we're pulling out. It's simply the pie that we are anticipating getting for next year, again this year, is just going to be smaller than the previous year. So again, I'm not here to say this is a solid levy. As you know, and something else we need to think about in terms of the levy, the timing of our meetings come fall. We'll meet in October, the month that we're supposed to finalize everything. And I think, if I remember the dates right, our F&F meeting and board meeting, just like last year or before when the voucher numbers come out. Remember, we approved a final one, and then we came back, I think it was a handful of days later.
Yeah,
And just
last minute.
Yeah, so I don't know if we want to change that schedule. There's a natural flow to it, but I think we just need to realize there's going to be a final one and then the post-voucher final levy. Just so, and Joe and I will do a better job of, that was all new to us at the time too, reporting that out to the board and making it very clear that these numbers are going to have some fluctuation. It should be very minor as we go forward with that final certification at the end of October. So those are the revenue limit tax levy. I like that form because it walks you through the complete calculation, all the exemptions, all the key parts of the revenue limit. The other item that I threw on a graph on the back is our open enrollment. And I look at open enrollment as, what's the net? What's the variance between in and out? So really looking, there's a lot of numbers on here, but really what you're looking at is the green bars. That's what has been historically a very positive net gain for the Waukesha School District. A lot of that is tied to eAchieve and the virtual schools. But you can see that trend of that variance between outgoing versus incoming is shrinking. Now we're guesstimating 16, 17 because you don't know who your open enrollment kids are until they show up. So we're going off of applications for this year, and then what we did is we took last year's applications and how many people actually showed up. What was the percentage that actually became students in our schools or in eAchieve. So that's a guesstimated number, but that trend is troubling. So we're going to have to look at what we're doing, the marketing of our district and things like that, because it is a competitive market out there now for students, and have we positioned ourselves correctly to respond to that? So those are the topics I just wanted to touch on. Again, next month we'll come back with a budget document for you to consider, and then we will roll into fall from there.
Mr. Como?
Yeah, thank you, Darren. First of all, going back to the first report, this is a really great summary, and I truly appreciate you putting the July 1 forecast in the middle, giving us a range. This is probably the best predictor, I guess. Maybe predictor is not the right word, but you really put together something that we can understand, and this is pretty early on in the game. For the last several years, we haven't really had this kind of information. This is really, really helpful. The new choice pupils adjustment, is that the voucher program? Is that, what is that? Is that the
That's
voucher?
the voucher. That's the,
Okay, I didn't
what they
remember the
call it.
name of it, so.
That's what's on the revenue limit calculation.
Gotcha. But this second chart, this is really telling. This is really telling. We all knew we've had a downward trend from a net perspective. It does show that in the early years of eAchieve, we were really, I think, fortunate to get out ahead of the curve when it came to online learning. But now there's a lot more competition, and we had kind of leaned on eAchieve to help us with our net result. I think this is going to have to be one of those areas of focus for this board and this district. Is how do we change that net to going back, get that green going up higher as opposed to lower. This is definitely some telling information now. Some things we don't control, right? People moving in, people moving out. There's certain factors that we don't control, but there are other things that we do control. And I know that we work really hard at looking at our program offerings, trying to improve those all the time. That I know we're really good at. We need to get to the bottom of this, though, or we're gonna, I'm happy that we have the hold harmless exemption in place. That's great, but again, that's not a cure. It helps us for a little bit. So we're going to have to focus on how do we attract people here.
One interesting, if you consider school financing interesting, with those vouchers, when we actually, and our enrollment will come back. I mean, it always will, and that's just the way it flows. But those exemptions, they help you on the way down, but they also hold you back
When you start to go back
start
up.
coming up. So it's a mixed blessing. I think that they do play an important role in stabilizing schools' finances as they are reducing. But the maddening thing with those exemptions, and Joe and I, you run the numbers so often, you eventually, because you don't believe it, when we start gaining kids back, we'll actually lose revenue limit authority, because those exemptions will drop off faster, because those the new kids are on that 3-year rolling average. The exemptions will drop off faster than you get to count them across that. So we'll actually lose revenue authority when we turn around initially. In the long term, it's beneficial, but just something to keep in mind with those exemptions. We're on the blessing part of them.
Right now, yeah. We will come to the other side of the
Yes.
coin, yes. Good warning there.
Yeah, I like eAchieve. I think it's a great program, but enrollment numbers have been very disappointing. And we need to quit looking at adding grades for enrollment, instead looking at why we aren't looking at different ways of reaching better enrollment numbers. To me, look at the radio ads. They don't seem to do that much as far as,
Percentage-wise.
yeah, and you don't expect direct mail to actually be that good either, but it seems to be more effective than radio ads. And I just haven't seen the same incentive at the leadership level to get enrollment up at eAchieve that we maybe had when we kind of retooled things a few years back, because we need another 200-300 kids into eAchieve. It just doesn't make sense where we're at right now, and we've been going, it will
Well, I
eventually.
think part of the problem is, we did change from having a corporate vendor to no vendor. Their marketing costs, far exceeded ours. And that is a big organization that we're competing against. I still think we're higher quality program, but, maybe we need to go back to some of the TV advertising that we used to do. And, the advertising on the radio this year was probably the best it's ever been, but it might be that we need to get back to some TV advertising.
I think compensation has to be tied to enrollment gains. If you don't have compensation of the leadership team tied to enrollment gains, you're not going to see enrollment gains. So there's no reason that we should be seeing these types of declines when we've added grade levels. We've added a lot of things to try and get enrollment up, and we haven't seen enrollment come up. And that wouldn't be acceptable in the private sector, and we're kind of running to achieve like a business to a certain extent.
But we've added administrative staffing for them to help that situation. It's my hope that when we establish a PR director, they can help with the advertising and some of the promotion as well.
Because, when you look at what we offer in that program, it's an excellent program. I could see if we were to go after like the Menominee, where they don't have good schools up there, and there's a lot of people, and in that entire area, in that entire region, we don't. We choose not to because it's not part of who we reach out to. We should be reaching out to them, and we would give them a better educational value in remote areas of the state. And instead of just kind of letting people come to us, we need to drag them into us and maybe offer programs that would attract them our way. And maybe getting some grants from, some of the entities that are interested in bringing those kids better education value. So I think eAchieve has tremendous untapped potential that's been, we just got to reverse this, and we got to somehow challenge our people to do that. And it's not just about adding new programs. Mr. Como?
Yeah, I think, Todd, you had tossed out there, it's going to help to have our PR person get hired in this next month or two. I know one of the top 1 or 2 reasons people move into a community is education. They're picking where they're going to move and where they're going to live based upon how good the schools are. And, perhaps one of the things, Todd, I know you were bouncing this around as an idea that, and we need to target realtors. We need to make sure that the realtors truly understand what we have to offer in our schools. And the whole idea behind the PR person is to talk about and to attract, when you talk about the good things, right, about what we do, hopefully that's going to be an attraction factor to people moving into this community. And so that PR person I do view as being very, very keen and very important as we move forward to try and come up with strategies to help with the net result that we're looking at. Because, boy, that net is as low as it's been in a decade, and it's an issue.
Mr. Ranachek?
This is what you were going to say, Pat, also the water? Or no? Nope. Okay. Now that we know that we're going to have water, that will also help people to know that, yes, they can bring their businesses here, they can plan a family here and build a home here, whatever. So maybe that's it too.
Mr. McCaffrey?
Just a quick question. Open enrollment students, does that count towards our declining enrollment? For instance, we have 200 kids, it does not.
No, that we count those kids as part of our
As part of
enrollment.
enrollment. And do we count the kids, we don't count the students that are coming in?
Correct.
Because right now we have more coming in than leaving.
Right,
Okay,
right.
I was just- The water may be a problem because you're gonna have an issue paying, my water bill is gonna be $2,600 a year.
Well, you have to
It'll be more
understand how
than my electricity
I
and
know
my gas.
what people were doing is taking their water bill, multiplying it by 3, and that's incorrect because half your water bill is sewer, which is not gonna go up. So you gotta look at your bill and figure out what the actual water cost is, and that
I'm not
may
so
be.
sure sewer's not going up though, Todd.
Yeah, I've heard it right from Dan Duke. I called him and I said,
No, I know.
what's the deal? And
I
he
know,
said, no,
know.
that.
I know
people-
what he said.
so-
I've talked to him
So
too.
you take the water portion and multiply it, and that's worst case scenario, so,
Yeah, that is worst case
Yeah.
scenario.
yeah. Yeah.
Can't,
become the scenario in the Waukesha water utility.
the plaque that they're going to, Mr. McCaffrey, the plaque that they're going to give the school district of Waukesha cannot cost that much.
And this is on camera, so in a few years, you'll be able to replay it and either say, Todd, I told you so, or Pat, just so you know.
That's true.
In 3 years, there'll be new technology, and this
That's
technology
exactly
won't
right.
work on them. So,
This will be archived somewhere.
yeah.
Yeah. Digging a well in my backyard.
So any other comments on the budget update for Mr. Clark besides the delta is not good, so we got to fix that.
Well, from a taxpayer perspective, what you're looking at, right, it's either flat prediction or it might even be decreased from the mill rate perspective. So that's good news for,
Yeah.
you know, at this time at least. I know we weren't looking at that good of news at this time last year, so.
And the only thing I'd add to the good news, I didn't mean that report to be all negative. We're looking at budget stability heading into 16, 17. I think
Right.
as a board member, I'm sure you appreciate
That's
not
good.
going through those meetings
That is
so
good.
many of you have been through in the past. So, so we have that going on our side as well.
Three of us. I don't think Mr. McCaffrey had to do too many of them, and Ms. Ronachek didn't have.
Mr. Schmidt?
Yeah,
Yeah, I did quite a few of them.
Ms. Ronachek never had to do any of them,
why
thank
I'm
goodness.
That's why I don't have any.
Okay, we'll move on to the year-end update.
Yeah, last month we reported out on how the close of the 15-16 school year was looking. And, you know, it's still a work in process. And Joe had mentioned one of the key things that's outstanding in terms of us being able to really, you know, narrow down where we're going to end the year is that health claims payable. Being self-funded, I'm learning. It's my first time at it. Used to be with you were fully insured, you knew what those premiums were going to be months in advance, and you'd really solve that budget line item and know exactly where you're going to be. When you're paying your claims as you go, there's a little more art to it than science, a little bit. So what I did is I developed a plan and I put ranges in there because I don't know exactly where we're going to be. June we think is going to run well, but you know things happen. So I wanted to report out on two things that I think if we are looking at in addition to fund balance, that this committee and eventually the board should consider. And one of the advantages of these is you really don't have to take action until, you know, any add to fund balance will hit our financial statements and will be reflected because that was June 30th, that snapshot in time. So these will really be an action after that time. But I think the difference is we have a plan in place that we know we will implement. So these are two suggestions. And again, there's ranges in dollars. And both of these items are things we talked about last month. The first one, and actually we looked on the next page is the amortization schedule tied to that Fund 38 debt. Above the line are the payments we've already made. And below is what we still owe on the Fund 38 debt that we currently have. And one of the ideas is to transfer some or all. I've targeted that last payment, either paying that in full or some portion. With the state trust fund loan, you have a lot of flexibility. It's not like bonds where you're set into specific principal and interest payments. What that would do would be to, if you look at the interest rate we're paying on that debt, 4.25%, would provide some interest savings to taxpayers. Eventually, they would pay that, and I think could be in the 100,000 range, maybe north of there. Or you could transfer the money into Fund 38 and just have it sit there and then make that payment when it's scheduled to be made. Either one of those is very successful. I think financially, what it really does is if you remember our long-term budget forecast, we think we have budget stability heading into 16, 17, hopefully 17, 18. But then as that revenue limit continues to shrink, if resident enrollment does not turn around, I think we are heading back towards some potential more difficult situations. If we made that payment now or set the funds aside now, you would take $1 million that we'd otherwise would have to budget from the 1920 school year. It sounds strange to say, and provide us budget flexibility at that time. So that'd be the other advantage of doing that. There's also the reserved fund, or for the health insurance. Part of our fund balance, and I put that in the executive summary, people throw around our fund balance number in conversations I've had. Keep in mind that we self-fund health insurance now, and a large part of that, about 15% of our fund balance, is reserved for the stability of our health insurance program, by design. And I look at those dollars as dollars we save from being fully insured. I mean, that's really the difference. So right now, we have $5 million reserved. And if we raised it to a fourth month of anticipated claims, you're getting around that $6 million mark. We don't have to go all the way to $6 million. I'm not saying we have to get to 4 months, but if we want to make an incremental movement towards that or hit it, that's another item as we firm up these numbers at year end, that we would bring forward for the board to consider. The other one, the one we've talked a little bit, I think, since I've been here, and I just threw it on the bottom of that year-end update report, is food service fund. We have a sizable food service fund balance. DPI begins to frown on large food service fund balance. And we had actually anticipated, Glenn and Joe and I had conversations about using some of those for facility improvements in our food service program. I think we do a good job with equipment. But if you would go to South's Cafeteria, for example, that I've been told by experts who were there many years ago, it looks like we haven't touched it. So we were going to proceed with that, but then when the RFP process came up, I didn't want to proceed with the team that wasn't going to be our provider once it was all done. So somewhere towards the end of the calendar year, I plan on bringing back an overall plan and strategy on how we can address that fund balance issue. Keep in mind, we don't necessarily control what our food service fees are. We're required, unless we get exemptions, we're required to adjust that. So it's not as maybe as simple as you would think. But again, I just want to plant that seed so when we come back in a handful of months with a plan that you'll have some background information on what we're talking about.
Mr. Como?
So what is that number at for the food service? It used to be over $1 million.
Right, yeah, right now, before this fiscal year ended, we were at about $900,000.
So we spent that down from like 1.3
No,
million
that's
or
just
something?
the excess cash balance.
Yeah, yeah.
And then we did add another 300, so now we're at about a little over $1.1 million.
Okay.
In excess cash balance. And what we have told DPI is, because what Darren had said is we told them we have a new food service provider coming in. We told them over that 2-year period that we would make a plan to reduce that.
Yeah, so we got a letter last year, right? Roughly last year saying, hey, you got to spend this down, guys. Are there any penalties? I mean, yeah, we should do our due diligence and try and work towards this, but are there any penalties if we keep it up at that $1 million level or whatever?
If you don't address it, but we presented them with a plan, and they agree with that plan that we set over this 2-year period that we would reduce that balance. But you do have to have a plan in place and act on that plan.
Okay.
And once we develop a plan, even if it's the preliminary one, towards the end of the calendar year, Joe and I plan on being proactive with them and saying, here's the plan we've talked about in at least draft form. The board will be deliberating just to keep them up to speed.
Keep the communication lines open. Yeah.
Now, the letters you may get are standard letters, so I'm not going to say you're not going to get one, but we have very open lines of communication with DPI and where we are on this issue. So I think we're in a good position that way.
Okay.
So the question I have, Mr. Clark, is right now, 3/15/2016, our fund balance not our fund balance, the balance due on this loan, debt service schedule loan right here. That balance must be around $3.5 million, or is it 3.8?
3 million.
Principal, right now, we have $4.3 million sitting out there.
Principal, where would that,
The payments, I'm sorry, that's principal and interest.
I just want principal.
Isn't it the balance, the 3 million?
3 million.
Yeah, that's principal and
Oh, then
interest.
Okay, so you just deduct the,
Not texting someone.
That was
upfront,
as of
then.
3/15, that was as of March
Yeah.
15th, right?
Right.
But that doesn't change, that principal amount doesn't change over this last 3 months because we make payments at
No.
or 1 year or?
yeah, our
660.
Like 3.8 million?
about $3.5
3.9.
million.
Yeah,
dollars.
somewhere in that
3.5.
range.
More like 3.5, right?
3.5 is correct.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. So why don't we borrow from our health fund, pay the health fund back, and not pay 4.25% interest?
Ooh. Being self-funded, I don't know if I'd recommend that.
Okay.
I don't mind the concept.
You still have to borrow the money. You would have to borrow the money if you needed it, right?
Right.
But it seems like paying 4.25% interest, and what are we getting for interest on the health fund account? Like nothing.
We're almost up to a half.
Yeah, almost up to a half.
Pretty excited about it. It's been a long
So,
time.
you know, we're throwing away dollars when we actually could say, let's borrow from another source at even if we paid at 0.5% interest, and if we ever had to borrow money to pay our health care things, we'd do it.
Yeah.
But at least we'd be free of this, and we wouldn't have to pay that extra interest.
I don't mind the concept. Whether I would take it from the health insurance restricted fund balance, maybe our unrestricted fund balance, which is also, a lot better than it used to be. That I'm a little more comfortable with, but the health insurance money, I would hate to go there.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm trying to say is it doesn't make any sense to continue to carry a debt that's a 4.25% interest. Somehow or another, we should just get rid of that.
Yeah, and the other thing, and we can calculate that, if we were to write them a lump sum check of 3.5 million, the impact on shared costs and the equalization aid formula, I can't tell you what that number would be, because you would, rather than spreading out those expenditures over several years, they would all fall in one fiscal year, and I'm not gonna even try to guesstimate what that aid impact is right now, but it's something we should at least consider if we want to pursue that line of thought, because again, I would agree, prepaying a 4.25% loan is in our best interest. I mean, we haven't seen rates from the pool or from our return on investment near that in, it's been a decade now, it's been a long time. But all those types of things, I think, are all worth investigating, absolutely.
I mean, even if we were to go to, it just doesn't make any sense. Yeah, check into the revenue formulas, but I can't imagine that we'd be penalized so much that we wouldn't want to go ahead. and
Yeah,
just-
again, I don't want to say it's
Yeah,
something that would kill the idea, but I just want you to know that issue is out there.
I mean, if we can afford to clean it up, then we should clean it up. Of course, the board would have to approve it, but as such, Mr. Como.
Overall, I agree with what you're saying, Kurt, but I don't think we should be rating the healthcare fund balance to do that, and primarily because we have actually been, I think, really fortunate from a claims perspective. We know that there will be a time where we will have a bad year, and we need to pay those claims right away. So, in concept, I agree. I think we just need to find it.
We're
in
not
a
really
different-
talking about taking from the healthcare fund if we have fund balance money, so.
Yeah,
yeah.
the other thing that we would have to look at is cash flow impact. Yeah, I don't want to get back into where we're short-term borrowing again and all of that, but we can run those numbers and come back with a plan. The concept, I think we all would agree, just like your mortgage, if you can prepay it when you're
Yeah.
paying more in interest than what you're earning, it makes sense to investigate a little bit. You are looking at a pretty short amortization schedule at this point, so, but we can come back with some numbers for the committee to consider.
But it's still $400,000, about,
When you add the interest up for the next 4 years, yeah.
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 It's a significant dollar amount.
So, Okay, any other questions? Doesn't look like it. Meeting adjourned.